Hi, everybody. It's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we get together on a weekly basis and tackle the things we thought were interesting from the world of football or soccer, whatever. We don't get involved in that row. I'm Tom Rennie, the host of the football show on Sirius XMFC. There you go, something I do for a living. Alongside me, I can't list all of his jobs because he works for everybody because he's great. It is MLS legend, top broadcaster, your friend of mine. It's only Dunny, Brian Dunseth. Hi, Dunny, you all right?
Yeah, I'm good, Rennie. I am one who likes the international window, not because just because I get to go away and cover the U.S. men's national team and actually work once again, make the moolah. But it's also because I enjoy a little bit of a break. You know, this havoc of being a Manchester United fan is fun. Yeah.
Well, we should start the show today with an apology about last week because some things came up last week unexpectedly in the schedule, which meant I couldn't turn up for the original recording time. And then Dunny's a proper celebrity, so I think he's been in Survivor or something. I don't know. He's been very busy. So he then couldn't make the secondary and third times he put together. By the time we could actually get together, it was like Friday. So again, we do say in all the promos and trailers for this program, we do get together most Tuesdays. But we also are people that work with the football calendar, so things change. So apologies to our subscribers. I got a few messages that were angry that we didn't get the chance to do Dunny is furious at Manchester United content. But the good news is nothing has changed. So we can do the exact same stuff again a week later. Let's start with it. I mean, we don't want to do all Man United. We're not a Man United program, but they are back page news once again after the thrashing loss against Tottenham Hotspur. It was sort of billed as not a make or breaks too strong, but a really important week for Erik Ten Hag. The first test was the beating by Tottenham, and I know people are like, "Oh, but Bruno Fernandes got sent off." And you look, they were being outplayed, but going down to 10 men changes everything, and then it being rescinded is a piss take, right? So I almost do not give them a pass, but I do accept some of the mitigations. Midweek was nearly a disaster. It ebbed and flowed and was a super fun game. Everyone's favourite slabhead, Harry Maguire, saving the game. From a neutral perspective, it was quite fun. And then Villa was, I don't often say this, I think Richard Keys was right. It was one of the worst games of football I think we've seen for a long time in terms of quality meeting expectation in a game against Aston Villa, but with the way they played, it's a good away point for anyone else. It'd be a good away point. So, Dunny, we're recording this at the very start of the international break. When we reconvene on Premier League content in a couple of weeks' time, are we going to be doing this again, or are we talking about Ruud van Nistelrooy's Red in My Army? Where are we?
Oh, I like that song. But that would just be for like a couple days, right? That wouldn't be like for the rest of the year. Listen, I just want you to know that Manchester United's 3-game schedule was expertly handled by Erik Ten Hag. Yeah, you lose 3-0 at home and Bruno Fernandes is sent off, Bruno Fernandes. It had no impact on the game, even though maybe it did. But then when, you draw 3-3 at Porto, one of the most difficult places to play in the world, that's evidently true. You're up 2-0, 20 minutes into the game. And, obviously, you turn to Harry Maguire to come in off the bench and get your game-tying goal in the dying moments. And then you go to probably the most difficult place to play in the Premier League at Villa Park, and you walk away with a 0-0 draw after rotating your center back duo of De Ligt and Lisandro Martinez. The center back duo that you paid a lot of money for and you've been planning on for a while, to bring in Johnny Evans, who was the best player in the field, and Harry Maguire, who were a combined age of 68-ish. It's the 4th clean sheet of the season, I'll have you know, for Erik Ten Hag's Manchester United. So a quick little reminder, since Barnsley, the 7-0 win, 0-0 at Palace, really good point at Palace. 1-1 against FC Twente. Because who wouldn't want to take a point off a powerhouse team at home at Old Trafford in the Europa League? You lost 3-0 against Spurs, but this is big Ange Postecoglou Spurs. Like, they are flying right now in the moment. 3-3, and again, it's really well documented. This is the most difficult ground to go to in Europe, in Porto, and tie 3-3. And then the 0-0 draw against Aston Villa. Listen, 14th position 2 wins, 3 losses, 2 draws in your opening 7 matches, which matches the record held in 1989. 5 goals scored so far. This is incredible. Why would we want to change anything right now if we're Ineos? After buying the club, meeting about moving railways to make it a more conducive atmosphere for building a brand new stadium, uh, redoing the entire board, like Barada, um, Ashworth, everybody else that's involved, wiping a backroom staff. It's going spectacular. This is
on the
unbelievable.
backroom staff thing, I did think it was quite funny at the weekend against Aston Villa, where they cut to Brexit Jim, who thought, of course, sacking the cleaners would cause no problems at all and make everything rosy on the field. They zoom out, and it's like, I think Berardi, and then they zoom out again, and then it's Wilcox. They zoom out again, it's Ashworth. They zoom out again, it's someone else. Zoom out again.
Sir Dave Brailsford was in there.
Brailsford is the one I'm thinking of, I think. Never forget the balls. I'm sorry, Sir Dave. And then even further out, Alex Ferguson is there. And I was just thinking, they've made all these moves. And again, these roles are important, right? Middle management is important. Upper middle management is important to a degree, any organization. But we're not supposed to know who they fucking are. Sorry, Tim. And yet I can name all these people. Now, you might be like, well, it's Manchester United, so you know all these people. Yeah, but also, I'm a journalist who covers the Premier League. I could do a couple at Villa, a couple at West Ham, a couple at City. I could do a few at most clubs. I could do the press officer and the chief exec and one or two others. There's not meant to be this many that are sort of household back page of the newspaper, to use an old cliche name. So I don't know why that was being so celebrated. I think it's weird. They're all sitting together in games, and they're all sitting around a table, I assuming doing what you just did, but more in a genuine way, saying, well, what can we do? I don't know. Try something else, maybe.
I've got an idea. You know what it's resorted to for me? This is what it's resorted to. I screen cap tweets, and I'm screen capping tweets because I feel like they express how I feel.
Yes.
So I've created like a montage of tweets that I would like to read out loud without giving any credit whatsoever to anybody. To not play the 2 center backs you brought into the club as our number 1 partnership in the biggest game, arguably, to keep your job. That's a man with no plan, that's out of ideas, and doesn't trust his players. That is not quote unquote rotation. By the way, I sent you this picture. Did you see the Erik Ten Hag lookalike that was next to Diego Dalot?
And I replied to you saying, what do you mean, you people? Because I'm sorry, not all bald geezers look the same. Though, to be fair, that looks exactly like kind of fat Erik Ten Hag. So
you're telling me that doesn't look like Erik? It's kind of like a mixture of an Erik Ten Hag and maybe like a Sebastian Barone, La Brujita back in the day. Because he wore that bib quite often for Sir Alex Ferguson as well after coming over. I already did the worst tally conversation. Here's a good one. United definitely have an identity underneath Erik Ten Hag. They are now a team who rarely wins or rarely scores. If you have more patience to give, then you're a saint. Personally, I'm completely spent toggling between anger, despair, and complete boredom.
I can't disagree with any of the comments you've stolen from social media, really. But he's going to stay, isn't he? I mean, look.
He's not going anywhere.
Is going to stay. We talk about it like there's a conversation happening here. There's not a conversation happening here. There was a time in the summer where it could have happened. The decision was made for whatever reason. They couldn't attract somebody, or they were convinced by Erik Ten's resignation. I don't know. But I do know the decision was taken. He was going to stay. And as we speak today at the start of October, after the first fifth of the season, they aren't going to get rid of him. They aren't going to replace him with Ruud van Nistelrooy. This week was not disastrous enough to replace him, nor was it great enough to dispel this conversation for a brief period in time. They cannot, for whatever reason, attract whoever they want. It may well be the people they want are in jobs, or there's not the right money, or it's not the right time. There's loads of reasons. But Dunny always says in these conversations, who are they going to get? Who's the replacement? And I genuinely think, and this is the astounding thing, Dunny, last bit on this, and then I want us to move on, because you've suffered today. You've hosted a full 3-hour show, maybe talking about this, a decent wedge as well. So you've done your bit today. You've done your service to this conversation. But, you said it a few times. They don't know. They haven't got the replacement lined up. They can't attract who they want. And so it has to continue, doesn't it? I mean, this does nothing for Brexit Jim's reputation as the man who's going to steer this ship.
Let me say this. And I mean this 100%, full transparency. if they want him to stay, they are matching what every other fan base around the Premier League wants, and that is for Erik ten Hag to stay. And that becomes a very laughable conversation when you really think about it. Because right now, there is nothing to indicate. The hierarchy might want him to stay. I'm not convinced the players want him to stay, but I know everybody else around England wants them to stay. Everyone else around the world that's not a Manchester United fan wants him to stay. Because, as you said a couple weeks ago, there could be not a cloud in the sky and the sun's shining. Someone's pissing on my leg. And right now, everything that I'm hearing that comes out of Manchester United specific to Erik ten Hag doesn't align with what I'm watching during a game. The idea of in control with and without the ball? What? What? So, yeah, I think right now, listen, I think we're at the phase where the evolution of a fan continues to evolve because you want your team to win, right? We're all tribalistic. We want our teams to win.
Yeah.
But now we also want a manager that can be front facing and transparent, but also can be motivating, but not in a motivating way that's on the training field or that is on the sideline during a game. We want a guy that verbalizes something that gives us hope, that gives us energy, that gives us something to want to believe in. And right now, I think that'd be really difficult for Manchester United fans to align with what's coming out of the manager's mouth in these post-game press conferences.
Right, let's move on to something else. I want to talk about Tottenham Hotspur.
Thank you.
Because, let's go on to something else that's equally funny but doesn't hurt you personally. There's a great interview with Ange Postecoglou, who is such a dour interview, and I think it's intentional. Of course, it's intentional. He doesn't want to give you too much. I think maybe in his personal life he might be more charming than he is in these interviews, and certainly when he's done punditry. People who work with him have spoken highly of him, and kind of when you see him on the TV, you think, yeah, okay, seems like a good dude, but in post-matches and pre-matches, he doesn't come across well, in my opinion. He's staring at the floor sometimes so hard, I wonder if there's a picture of, like, Sydney Sweeney on the reporter's boot or something, because he can't keep his eyes off it. I watched the one with Glenn Powell a couple of days ago. This film I've ever seen. Sorry, Tim. Watched it twice, though. Don't know why. He said before the Brighton game, right? I've got to paraphrase here, but he was asked about like solidity, and this game was always screamed goal fest, right?
Yeah.
And he did this amazing line, which I'll paraphrase, which was like, no, we're not going to have a plan for like defending and seeing the game through. We're going to have a plan to entertain, be thrilling, and hopefully we'll come out on top. He did entertain. It was thrilling. They did not come out on top. And his post-match was like, this is the worst moment of my time ever at Tottenham Hotspur. Like, welcome
I've got some
to
quotes.
Tottenham.
I've got the quote. The quotes were,
quote me.
It was unacceptable in the second half. It's the worst defending since I've been here. And he goes, I hated the fact that we accepted our fate.
See, what aggravates me a little bit about this, or that's too much, perplexes me, leaves me flummoxed, is that at 2-0 up at Brighton, what are you expecting in the second half? An offensive onslaught from one of the most creative teams in the country. Yeah. And so what do? Well, he didn't bring on Ibisuma, I think, till like 65. Papa was maybe a little bit later.
No.
Was it later?
It was the 80th minute. They'd given up the 3 goals. It was the 78th minute when he made his subs. Yeah.
Like, when they're on top, or when they pull one back, I think the first goal from Inter was like 3 minutes or 4 minutes or something like that. You might start thinking then, all right, okay, I've been a manager for a long time. I've worked for Yokohama Spare Tires and the one in Glasgow that ain't Rangers, and I was like in charge of some teams in Australia. I've been at some big clubs, mate, and I've won all the big trophies, so I know how to navigate a game like this.
Yeah, too, mate.
I know how to navigate this, mate. All right, mate, don't question me, mate. You gonna let me answer? Yeah, okay, sure.
Yeah. Don't question my integrity, mate.
But he didn't do the thing that managers do, and what I don't get is the way he spoke before the game was suggestive that if they lost the game, they would lose it because of his principles and because of what they do. And they did lose it because of his principles and because of what they do. And if you could have subbed in Thomas Tuchel or David Moyes or whatever at halftime or at 2-1, they'd have gone right. Defensive midfield, drop off 10, 15 yards. They don't do that. And that's actually quite fun for me and for us as a collective. And I hope Spurs do really well because I want everyone to play like that. If you come to London and you pick a team to watch, go watch Tottenham because you're guaranteed a real fun time. But then don't whinge at me afterwards that it didn't work out because, Dunny, if you play the high wire game, sometimes you're going to fall off.
Well, the most funny, well, I guess the most fascinating thing about this is that I'm listening to Spurs fans bitch and moan. Hold on a fucking second. Sorry, Tim. Weren't you the ones that were complaining about Jose Mourinho and the style of play? Weren't you the same ones bitching about Antonio Conte? Like you want pragmatism, but you want excitement. So in the midst of both of them, you want some common sense. But to have the common sense, you got to have the self-belief. And maybe, just maybe, we should acknowledge that Big Ange Postecoglou, what he's doing with this team is similar to what Mikel Arteta was doing with Arsenal in his first couple of years. Because Arsenal is as fun and as attacking when it comes to certain games as any team in the world. But they also have that nuance of closing up shop, seeing games out, and the Dunsethery, the dark arts of going away to a Man City, saying, "Okay, cool, yeah, okay, well, yeah, totally, yeah, we can play two styles." So I'm stuck with this conversation because I really enjoy, as a neutral, I'm not a Spurs fan. I enjoy the way they play. I like the way they play. They're exciting. They're fun. But also there's this falsehood. And the falsehood is, well, they just play a high line. The high line had all, sorry, Tim, to do with the 3 goals that they conceded. These were individual errors. They were marking mistakes. They weren't touch tight in certain situations. And again, there's a nuance to the conversation because you're up 2-0, and this is why they say it's the most dangerous lead in football. When you're up 2-0, you're like, got it. You do a little bit less hard yards. You do a little less communication. Keep the game for guys. We're up 2-0. Calm down, boys. We got this. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, boom, get smacked in the face. Because what happens inevitably is, and I talked about this last week, I think that data point of Brighton going to Chelsea and losing the way they did becomes kind of this little moment, this little flicker, this little sliver where they say, remember that game at Chelsea? Well, that's where we learned what we can do. And that's what we learned what we need to do better. I think what Brighton showed was, okay, we were in the first half. Sorry, Tim. Second half, let's play, man. Like we got nothing to lose. Like let's play. Let's play for the fans. Let's play for each other. Let's show what we can do. So it's a weird 90 minutes. But I think what I think the lack of subs is almost like on purpose. It's almost like, all right, handle it. Because he's not really demonstrative, right? Hands in the pocket. He's got his sleeve, he's got his jacket on, puts his hands in his pockets. The bottom of his jacket kind of ruffles out. He sits there on the sideline. He gives the facials, all that stuff. But it's almost like he wants them to figure it out, sort it out on the field. I trust you. Well, the guys that he trusts usually, Udogi's really solid. Van de Ven was at fault for the second goal. Kuti and Porro were at fault for the third goal. And it's almost like you lost the game, not because of the midfield. You lost the game, not because you didn't get that third goal, even though Brendan Johnson at the near post, I think around the 53rd minute, could have made it 3-1. Yeah, they made mistakes and they got punished. So could this be a reference point, or is this a glimpse into, oh, I know the problem at the end of last year, that maybe those problems still exist? Because his body language suggested to me this was what he thought he had maybe passed, specific to the 3-0 win at Old Trafford and the performance they put in, just a week earlier.
I mean, the flaws remain the same. I think the issue is that he isn't sort of fixing those individual errors. They're still conceding set pieces. They're still being caught with like 2 or 3 men over and no one on the cover. Plus, they don't go to tactical pragmatism at a time where it will be a prudent thing to do. But look, I want to see how this plays out. I know that it was a real nightmare afternoon for Tottenham in the end and all of that. But I genuinely think they're going to win the Europa League. And I would still back them to finish 4th over everyone else in that race right now, because they're going to win more than they lose playing like this. But yeah, I think maybe Postecoglou might need to continue to back himself in post as he does in pre. Right, some other things to get to. Before we get there, we'll do some winners and losers from the weekend as well. I did want to just do some brief housekeeping. I'll keep it brief today. Sometimes I wibble on too much in housekeeping. If you're subscribed to this program, we thank you. Tell at least one friend this week. You got friends, right? We've all got friends. Dunny's my friend. I would tell him about this show. I would tell him. He knows about it because he hosts it when we can be bothered to turn up. But tell a friend that most Tuesdays they can get this in their inbox. And if you're listening as a podcast right now, go on whatever app that you are listening on and give us a 5-star review, all 5 stars. Wherever it is, leave us a written review if you can as well, and I'll read out some of the best ones on the program. And you can also watch the program in its entirety on YouTube as well, where we want more subscribers. So if you're listening as a podcast and you're not subscribing on YouTube, do it now. We'll give you 5 seconds.
Hey, Adam. Hey, Chris. Hey, Tom.
Thanks for subscribing, everybody. I like how the third name you could think of was Tom.
Well, then it was Jerry afterwards.
Anyway, that's housekeeping. Right, let's move on. Look, I've got quite a long list of people that I think were brilliant this weekend, so we might do quite a long list of heroes in the weekend. And I'll have a couple of Calvin Phillips style losers to do as well, which we'll get to. Before we do that, of course, lots of our listeners across America would love to know what you've been up to in terms of MLS over the last few days. We're heading towards decision day, the big desk, all the games going on. Western Conference is kind of closed. We know who's eliminated and we know who is in the cup, though of course there's some jiggery-pokery to be done in terms of position. But the other conference still open for 1 or 2 spots. So tell us where we are going into the final few days.
Yeah, so the Eastern Conference, you got a couple teams where goal differential is going to straight up matter. So the final determination is going to be wins, but then goal differential afterwards. So in these final few spots, 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9 in the Eastern Conference, in terms of momentum and opportunity, and still goal negativity versus goal positive is going to be a conversation heading into decision day on October 19th. In the Western Conference, everything is pretty dialed in with the exception of the Portland Timbers. Minnesota United last week ended up getting in this great run of form. Eric Ramsey has kind of turned this group around in the last 4 games. They're flying. Whereas Phil Neville and the Portland Timbers, I did their game midweek, and there was kind of this understanding and this self-belief that they were gonna beat Austin. They ended up losing to Austin. Then they were gonna beat Dallas. They ended up drawing Dallas, and now they're going to Seattle in a must-win game for them. Not just because they need points; they're already in the playoffs, but not because they need points, but because it's Cascadia Cup, the rivalry, the regional tournament between Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver. That is on the line for match day, decision day. Excuse me. The rest of it's just a little bit of the minutia of movement. It's really all about matchups. So the international window on the backside, Tio Max Bretos and I will be on the road in Houston, who they just got the wheels knocked off them in St. Louis. They'll play host to LA Galaxy. It'll be interesting because it'll be the last game. So you think like maybe Galaxy will rest and recuperate. I don't think that'll be the case because they'll be able to bypass some of the early rounds of teams. So they just don't want to lose that momentum by proxy of winning the Western Conference. They've been fantastic. So that's kind of where it all looks like. I would say in the Eastern Conference, keep an eye on Orlando City. That's the one team I don't think anybody's going to want to play because if they can get past what right now looks like NYCFC, they just went to Cincinnati, dropped 3 on Pat Noonan's side. Oscar Breja, my former teammate right now, has this group flying. So I think they could be one of the big surprises in the Eastern Conference if no one's paying attention.
And the other question I wanted to ask you about what's happening in the US right now is about Mauricio Pochettino, who is officially confirmed. He'll take charge of his first couple of matches this week, which he'll be working on. And of course, he chatted to our good friends at SiriusXM FC a couple of days ago on the show that I present, but the day that I wasn't working. Fuck off, Tim. Sorry, Tim. Next time I want to be on, okay? Next time I want to be on. But no, the guys did a great job.
Do it.
Give us your view on Mauricio Pochettino chatting to SiriusXM FC this week. He was sending the positive vibes.
Well, I think he said what a lot of people have said in this position, but it carries more weight because he's Mauricio Pochettino. I think on top of that, the idea of like, no, we don't want to qualify. No, we don't want to just, get to the knockout round. No, we want to have the belief that we can win it. He's trying to change what this has looked like over the past whatever the broad stroke of months looks like. Listen, it's going to be a little bit light, right? He lost Chris Richards. Serginho Dest is unavailable. Tyler Adams is unavailable. And then Flo Balogun scores a goal. Monaco's top of the table in Liga, and he pops his shoulder out. Tim Weah's got an ankle injury, so he's withdrawn. Johnny Cardoso is withdrawn with an ailment. So Tanner Tessman, Brandon Vasquez, and Zendejas at Club America are all coming in. I'm intrigued to see what it looks like. Tanner Tessman and Gianluca Busio were 2 of the outstanding central midfielders for the Olympic team in France this summer. I think Aiden Morris is going to be an absolute starter with, if there's one player that I think benefits the most from this change, and because of the inability to rely on Tyler Adams's body right now, that's Aiden Morris. I think Aiden Morris is going to have a huge opportunity in these next couple games. For Mauricio Pochettino, here's the challenges. Short amount of time. For example, Christian Pulisic and AC Milan in on Sunday, so everyone's going to start arrivals on Monday. That means recuperation process is going to be in play, the physical side. The mental side with sleep, that's going to be an issue. Effectively, you want to think Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are going to be training sessions. So can you get 3 to 4 training sessions with this group of players to effectively, and he brought this up, play a 4-4-2 or 4-3-3, hybrid of a 4-2-3-1 with and without the ball in certain sectors of play. I love the matchups against Panama and away against Mexico because I think, unlike maybe some of the international friendlies, this will give him a real idea of who he can trust, who he can't trust, what he likes, what he doesn't like. And remember, there's a revenge factor in here for this U.S. group because it was Tim Weah's red card against Panama that, completely shifted the future of the U.S. men's national team program in general. Because had Tim Weah not got the red card, I think they beat Panama. They get the result, whatever Uruguay result looks like. They go into the next round. Colombia, they probably lose. And everyone say like, well, it's we understand what the group is. Well, everything changes. So I think he's going to come out of this with a better understanding of what they need to do going forward. The next window is going to be November. It's going to be a Nations League qualifier. It's going to be a quarterfinal. It's going to be an away and then a home leg. It looks like it might be Costa Rica away and then Costa Rica at home, which will provide its own interesting set of circumstances and challenges. And Mauricio Pochettino will get a good idea of what CONCACAF region rivalries look like in a short amount of time, having previously not understood it. He's more than capable. Obviously, Argentine, the experience in the domestic football, the international football as a player, but this is going to be his first, cannonball into the international window. So the learning curve, I'm excited to see him train. The process, I'm excited to have the conversation with him. And it'll be Saturday night on Turner TNT. We'll have the coverage of the U.S. game against Panama, and then down in Guadalajara, the U.S. against Mexico on Tuesday night.
You know what I like about this as well is that it's evident that people at the US Federation listen to Weak in the Tackle because Dunny told you, go get your fucking guy. Sorry, Tim. And they did it. They went and got him. That was the point.
By the way, US soccer
was Jim. Are you listening, Jim?
But by the way, JT Baston from US Soccer specifically was telling us like he was the negotiation pillar between Chelsea and Mauricio Pochettino's camp, because it wasn't just Mauricio Pochettino, it was his entire coaching staff, which has been hired by U.S. Soccer as well. So U.S. Soccer was the one that negotiated whatever the disaster was happening between Bowley, Blue Coat, Clear Lake, Bali, all of that stuff. It was U.S. Soccer, the one that finally put that all to bed and figured out a way for them to move on from one another.
Yeah, they got their guy. Well done there. Listen, I want to get to some heroes this week. We'll do a few heroes because I've got quite a few from this weekend. And I want to start, you mentioned Mexico there. I just want to start with Raul Jimenez. I just want to talk a little bit about him because, when I was covering the Premier League like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when he was in his absolute pomp at Wolverhampton Wanderers, we were doing shows where we knew Wolves had to sell. That was coming up. And we knew Man United needed a striker at that point. Don't they always? And I was one of the key people who were like, go get Raul Jimenez. Like, this is the guy you need. He has got all the attributes. He scores headers. He scores on the turn volleys. He's got great positional sense. He works great with partners. At the time, him and Adama Traore had this amazing link up. And then he gets that horrific injury, the head collision with David Luiz, it's skull fracture. And he has been, this is the wrong phrase, but I need something better. He's been quite painful to watch. Because I knew how good he was, and I'm sure it's been more painful to Raul Jimenez and Mexican fans and whatnot. But you knew the talent was there, and yet something had gone. He hated wearing that little pad he has to wear. There was a game in our season where he took it off, and they were like, look, sorry, Raul, you have to put this on. Legally, you must wear this. Otherwise, our insurance, I would assume, will not cover your safety. So he has to put it on. And back end of last season, he was having a couple of moments. He was doing a couple of bits, but you were like, okay, final flourish, and they'll move him on Fulham and get someone else in, which again, Menez have been scoring some goals. Start of this season, scoring fantastic goals, leading the line fantastically well, and playing with such supreme confidence. Now, if you haven't seen the assist for the Pereira goal for Fulham, by the way, should have beaten Man City this weekend. Yeah. I'm so annoyed they didn't. They were so good. If you haven't seen this, let me read you a review from Cam Ramsey, as we're doing social media content on the show. Cam said, This belongs on the top shelf of your local corner shop. Quite honestly, the filthiest assist ever caught on camera shouldn't be shown before 9 p.m. Should be blurred out. If you're down bad, fix your eyes on this and do not take them off it. And if you go to Fulham's kind of Twitter page, they've been rolling it on a loop. It is a bouncing ball that sort of comes into his path, which he controls on the thigh. And as the ball is bouncing up, he does a kind of back heel into the ground. I'm giving him full benefit of the doubt that he knew Pereira or someone was going to be in the penalty box to try and find them in the space. And he kind of back heels it on the bounce with two players around him, past another defender into Pereira, who scores. It was like pouring custard on your sticky toffee pudding. It was like finding out that the other people at the wedding aren't coming, and so you get all of their desserts. It was like going to a bar and saying, oh, can I have a drink? And they're like, drink, it's happy hour all night long. It's £1 for anything you want. And also, the pub's closing tomorrow, so you can go behind the jump if you want and pour as many as you want. It was every woman you ever wanted to sleep with saying yes in your memory, where in reality they said no. You know, it's all of that. It was so good. It was just so good. I loved it. I could watch it forever. And I'm just, Dunny, so pleased. Like, when players get these sorts of injuries, there are the career that footballers have is so short. It is so short. You know, at the absolute best, the best is like 20 years, right? On average, it's like 6 to 8. At the very, very top level, it's less than that at your absolute peak. So to see someone come back from the pits of despair to do something like this, and in the macro of the season hit good form as well. Yeah. I know that, you know, you lot have got to give it to the Mexicans, but I do love this story, I've got to say.
My up has to be Saudi Arabia. Their World Cup ambitions have been boosted by a key FIFA voting change. So, you know, the oil-rich nation that needs a World Cup, that needs to, you know, continue to build around what they're doing, both domestically and now internationally, the opportunity for the 2034 World Cup right around the corner. You want to know why? Well, you know, you have separate votes when you're voting for a World Cup, and, you know, like 2018 went to Russia, 2022 goes to Qatar. Well, Gianni Infantino decided that the council needed to make a slight adjustment for the 2030 and 2034 World Cup. Because I don't know if you know this, there's this terminology called, quote unquote, en bloc. And what happens is when you vote en bloc and you either vote for or against, well, you're voting en bloc for not just the individual tournament, but for the next tournament following. So what does that mean? That means if you decide that you do not want to vote or you do not want to choose, I don't know, a place like Saudi Arabia, well, what's going to happen? Well, that means Spain, Portugal, and Morocco would also fail in the process. So because en bloc, you're saying like, no, I'd rather not have Saudi Arabia. That means that also now for the 2038 World Cup, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, which are bidding for that World Cup, don't get it. So it's just so soothing to the soul that those in charge like Gianni Infantino, they just have the game, you know, the best intentions, little heart-shaped hands.
So you have to, if you want Spain, Portugal, Morocco to get the World Cup because it's together, you have to vote for Saudi Arabia because no one else wants their World Cup. So you have to do it, right? Is that what you're saying? They've got no choice.
A unanimous agreement was made by FIFA council members to change the previous process that makes it more difficult for unhappy nations to go against Saudi Arabia in this voting bloc. Decision to change the award process means that if countries were to vote against Saudi Arabia, effectively en bloc, they would also vote against Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, who would be hosting, working on the bid to host in the World Cup afterwards.
I mean, away from anyone's feelings on Saudi Arabia, you know, I've given my thoughts many times. I go with what Amnesty International tell us about Saudi Arabia and what it's like for the people who live there and all of that. But away from that, even if you didn't have a problem with one nation or another, like, let's do it in one tournament cycles. Obviously, with a good amount of notice to make it happen. But even if it was like your favorite nation, like it's so flagrantly, and I say corrupt, I don't know. It's in the very literal sense of corrupted. Like it needs to be cleaner, it needs to be fairer, and it needs to this cannot continue in this way. And also, actually, I will say we shouldn't have a World Cup in Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry, we just shouldn't. It's not that Saudi people don't deserve the World Cup. They haven't got enough people there. You know, he hasn't got to be in Europe all the time, but let's, I don't know. Not cool. Not cool, buddy. Got caught with another one now. So is that your hero? Is that going to be your hero?
Yeah, I'm very I don't know, full of today, some would say. Sorry, Tim.
I have another quick hero for you, and then we'll do some villains. I just wanted to mention this, Dunny, because I don't know if you'd seen this, but I thought you'd appreciate this as a centre half who gets forward to score from corners or whatever. Did you watch any of Derby County against Queens Park Rangers this weekend? While I'm describing it, pop on your internet machine, go to the Derby County Twitter page while I tell people about this goal, because this may be the best header from a centre half going forward I have ever seen. Maybe something else will jump out to me, but I've been thinking about this all day. It's by Curtis Nelson. Curtis Nelson's header.
Oh,
yes.
Oh,
yes. So the corner comes in from the right-hand side against QPR, playing for Derby County. He is maybe 2 yards in the penalty area, left of centre, and the ball is chipped to the edge. Like, you remember that Paul Scholes volley against Aston Villa where it goes to the edge and he volleys it in and it's the crossbar? You watch it and you think, oh, someone's going to volley this home. He heads it in from beyond the penalty spot into the top corner with such a fearsome force. I can only assume that wherever Tony Pulis is right now, he managed to get, like, every time a goal like this is scored, Tony Pulis gets his wings. Like, it was that sort of thing. It was amazing. It is a proper slap on the head sort of header from a distance that you shouldn't be scoring headers from. It just belongs in the Hall of Fame, Dunny, of centre-half slab head goals.
Yeah, it was that's a phenomenal goal. My down for the week is going to be the Virgil van Dijk on Gahey wrist pull from behind.
Oh,
and
yeah.
when they say it had no impact on the play, I just go, okay. Listen.
What do you do? What do you do?
Okay. When the ball's coming from the left-hand side and you're attacking the ball and you're trying to get away from your mark, the goal's ahead of you, but you have to turn your body. Like, if you're the goal, I have to turn my body to reference the ball, and then my snap header. I go far post, I go near post, I do whatever. But once I get the jump on my mark, if I'm trying to run and jump and attack the ball, I've got a guy pulling me from behind, grabbing my wrist and just going like this while I'm taking off. Of course that's going to have an impact on the play. This, of course it does. Like, I don't understand it. I don't, like, credit to Virgil van Dijk. Brilliant. You got away with it. Little Dunsethery, dark arts, thumbs up. I love that stuff. But for VAR not to intervene, for them to come out publicly and say it had no impact on the play, you're out of your fucking minds. Sorry, Tim. Of course it did. And by the way, Liverpool supporters, for those that are mad at me, be like, oh, shut up, idiot. I'm a stupid American. By the way, you would be screaming the opposite way if Gahey did that to Virgil van Dijk, and you end up losing the game 1-0. So I have such an issue with this because it's so evident what he's gotten away with, and for them to then double down and say it didn't have an impact on the play. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like last weekend, Nelson Semedo pulled down Diogo Jota when he was not going to get that cross. The penalty was given in the game between Brentford and Wolverhampton Wanderers this weekend, which we ain't got time for today, but was awesome if you love all football in 1993. So check it out. It was amazing. But there was a penalty in that game, and I forget the protagonist now, but like a player holds someone down off the ball and they get a penalty. You know, there's two penalties I can think of top of my head last couple of weeks that didn't materially impact what happened. James Tarkowski this weekend on Tonali. It didn't materially impact anything because the shot, I think, from Jacob Murphy was already so far over the top. It was in the Gladys Street stands when the penalty was given. But it was a foul. So if it was a foul and the play was live and you have VAR, you have to review it. I agree completely. It should have been a penalty. You know, West Ham didn't get one for Somerville from someone against Chelsea a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. You're never going to get consistency, but you can't explain it away. What you do is what they did after the Man United Bruno Fernandes one and be like, sorry, we screwed that up. We didn't get it right. Nothing we can do. Listen, I do want to touch on a couple of other quick things before we go. I've got two villains for you. I've got two. Number one is just for me, Calvin Phillips this weekend, who had his best game for West Ham. The trouble is for him, plays for Ipswich now. There's two bits in this game. Number one, after 30 seconds, Mikel Antonio slightly presses him, and he coughs up possession to Antonio, and that leads to West Ham's opening goal. And again, I don't feel necessarily vindictive about Calvin Phillips because he's gone, and, I wish they never signed him, and I wish him well. I want him to recover. But, I admire him in a way because he knows he's sort of gone, but he wants to play, and I hope he does find it somewhere. But, his responsibility at Ipswich is to be the senior pro in this team with great experience, and to give a goal away in that way makes me think you might need to make the step down, because every time you play, you cost the team you're playing for every single game. And I don't know how much that can continue. And later in the game, there's a great moment. Jarrod Bowen is taking him on. And I saw it on social media, but I'm nicking it because it's funny. Jarrod Bowen is having a little bit of a tough time. He just got dropped from the England squad. And he's looking up and he's thinking he's a bit nervy. And he sees it's Calvin Phillips. And he's like, oh, it's fine. I'm going to score. And just sort of and Phillips gives him so much room to chop inside and score. Calvin Phillips is a villain, not because I wish him ill, but it was another example of him just, look, it's not, I think it's over. And I think it may be, you're going to drop even further down. In the end, he's still getting paid money to be as bad as he is. So, I don't know, a little bit villainous there. But I did want to mention this. Another game you probably wouldn't have seen, but you may have seen it on the social media, between Magdeburg and Gruther Forth. Do you know Gruther Forth or Firth?
Yeah,
Do you know them?
Yeah, Timothy Tillman used to play there.
Right. So they're in the second tier of the Bundesliga right now. And there was a game this weekend that's so fucking funny. Sorry, Tim. I've got to tell you about it. Only because it finished 2-2. Fine, whatever. In the game, Firth have a goal kick. The goalkeeper rolls the ball to a defender who's standing in the 6-yard box. The defender is Gideon Young. Gideon Young, under pressure, stops and picks the ball up as if it's like, oh, no, we ain't taking the goal kick. And the referee was like
Gabriel did last year and got away with it?
Like Gabriel and got away with it in the Bayern game. Exactly like that, but he didn't get away with it. And a penalty is given and it's scored. Now, that's funny on its own, right? It's funny. They ballsed it up. They tried to get away with it. And the referee was like, I've got eyes. Like, I saw this. 2 minutes later at the other end, they go on the attack against Magdeburg. And a guy on the edge of the penalty area gets brought down, right? He gets brought down on the edge of the penalty area. Everyone thinks it's going to be given as a foul. It's not given as a foul. But the defender in the penalty area, again, 3 minutes later, thinks the foul has been given. So he stops the ball with his foot and picks it up. And another penalty is given at the other end, 3 minutes after it's just happened, but just picking the ball up. So 2 penalties were given in the space of 3 minutes for players in their own penalty area, inexplicably, when the game was live, just picking the ball up with their hands.
Amazing.
It's just so funny. And when the referee does like this one for handball to signal it's happened, he's literally going, it's just excellent. It is so worth your time. And so everyone involved is a kind of anti-hero of the week for me. Amazing.
Love it.
Right, we are out of time for this week's Week in the Tacker. Remember, if you are subscribed on one platform, subscribe on all the platforms and leave us a great review. That's Brian Dunseth over there. I'm Tom Rennie. Tim Horsey produced the programme, and we'll hopefully be back next week.